I've had this hideous seam on the side of the boat here for over a year now, since we joined the hull and the deck together, and it's been glued together for almost a year. I think it's a year in 2 weeks' time. So a lot has happened since then. As you can see, the boat's really starting to come together, but this seam, this flange that I have here, and I want to cut it off. Oh, Spider's not too impressed. I've been cutting away and he's not happy, so I'll get rid of him because he's pooping everywhere. But that seam is going to come off. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to grind it 1 centimetre out from the edge, and then I'm going to have to finally cut it back. I imagine it's going to be a flap disc or something. I'm not really sure what to do. Maybe a belt sander or something. But as you can see here, as long as I can see through, I'm good. If I cut along and I can't see through, I've got a problem. I must be on the hull side. And there is still about probably 5 millimetres of hull seam there that I can see. But I'm going to try to cut all the way along. I don't know how I'm going to go. I'll do a section at a time and just see how we go. Quite a bit of flap disking along here, but as you can see, there is not one void in that whole seam, and I was pretty paranoid about getting a void in it. Nothing you can't fix later on, but this is going to have a rub rail all the way along it, and I've sort of got areas there I'm 1/2 centimetre out, maybe 8 millimetres, probably about 1/2 centimetre just there. And I've got a couple of areas up here where the deck's probably 1/2 centimetre out. So I think my efforts to expand the deck paid off, because I've got it about as close as I can get. I'm going to get a flap disc in here and flap disc off all of this. It's just getting too close, and I don't want to have any real sort of damage. And I only intend to put about a 35 to 50 millimetre rub rail all the way along. It'll be an anodised aluminium rub rail. Bruce and I from MV Mistress, or Sailing Vessel Mistress, the other day were talking about how when we say it's 35 degrees, people just don't appreciate what it's like to work in that heat. I'm pretty used to working in the heat. I grew up in a cold place, but, well, cold relatively speaking in Australia, one of the coldest towns in the country, and I've acclimatised to working in this heat. What gets me here is the humidity and just the extra work and the dust, and it's very, very physical. I can work like a friggin' horse until the cows come home, and yeah, you have to when you're working in this heat. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. And what I absolutely love is my wonderful stanchion bases all look uniform. And every day I come into work, I just do something, and something results in something else, and then something else results in something else, and eventually it gets done. That's my motto, and I try to keep to that.
Trying to knock over tasks in order to be able to move from one task to the next is often difficult, as there are seemingly so many stages, overwhelming stages to a completed boat. Having some fairing compound left over beckoned me to start on the refrigerator cabinet and the surrounds to allow me to start working on interior projects in the coming weeks and months. This is going to include the entire saloon spray job and the install of wall linings where needed. Now for Janet and I, it will be such a nice change of pace to be able to see a couple of finished areas. Up until now, the entire project of over 5 years has felt like it has been in a state of flux.
And I had a bit of spare left over, so what I've done is I've done all of the insert here for the upright, and I went along and I just bogged all of my stanchion bases. And that's pretty important because they're ready to spray, They just need to be detailed sanded. So each one of those is now fully faired. Well, got fairing compound on it, and it's pretty ugly stuff. It's rough as, but it's going to take a lot of hand sand. There's no point in trying to put it on neat. You just bog it on and then sand it off and then fair it again if you have to. But yeah, so that's been a big morning getting all these guys done over here, and this guy here, and then these are going to sand up. You know, they're all ready to do, but I'm heading home. I'm going to have the afternoon off. Okay, our helm winch setup is quite compact and quite complicated. I have a lot going on up in this area here, and I just want to show you a couple of the issues that I've come to. And there's been a lot of comments about reinforcement and strength and all the like, so I just want to explain exactly how I intend to address this and how I have addressed it to make sure that I've got potential for masses of load all pulling on this area here. So my initial idea was to have my bank of clutches sitting on the top of this ramp here, leading down into firstly my 50 power winch here, and secondly my 45 ST Evo winch down here. Now, I came across a couple of issues with that. Firstly, there was so many lines running through this area, and it would just be so complicated. I'd have at least 8, perhaps 9 lines running down here, all doing something. Reef 1, 2, 3, halyard, topping lift, main sheet potentially. The conclusion I came to was that I need to keep it as it is, but what I intend to do is put the clutches up here on the coach house roof where I can really super beef it up. It's already strong because it's already laminated into the roof of the boat itself, but by having them up there, that means that the angle of approach can be controlled as well. I need to have a proper 5-degree angle of approach, and that isn't 5 degrees here. It's basically 5 degrees from this plane onto this winch to make sure that the lines rise up to the self-tailer and then off. So there's a couple of things to think about. Now the second thing I came up with was the problem with once I had a winch handle on my power winch, that was fine. That's no problem. But if we have a look at where the second winch is down here, that could potentially interfere with that winch. And obviously we don't want to have a smaller winch handle. Now this one is a power winch, so I do have the backup of being able to use it manually or motorized. But where I came into my problem here was that this is a 50 power winch and it has risen on a riser. The modification kit actually allows for a riser, and now that's about 3/4 of an inch, that riser, and that created a problem down here. So the yogurt pot here is winch number 2, and it's going to be positioned around about here somewhere. Check this out. That's not going to cut it. So I had to come up with a way to deal with that. So I'm going to get rid of this for a change, and I'm actually going to make a riser out of some G10 material that will elevate my winch to the same height as the 50, which will alleviate some of those problems. Now the second problem that I have is the length of the winch handle, so I may have to go for a shorter winch handle on this particular winch down here. And the other thing I have too is here I have a shelf, so I intend to put this on either side of the shelf. And the idea being that it's reinforced on this side, it's reinforced on this side, that is fully glassed in. It is also very close to where the whole console is actually glassed to the deck itself. So incredibly strong area here, and it will also allow for the movement of the winch and the lines. So by raising this winch, I can just slide that down to where it's actually going to be, which is about here. I can eliminate the majority of the winch handle problem. Still got good operation of the winch here, and obviously a little bit of clearance here is always good. I can go for a slightly shorter handle, and that is what I'm probably going to have to do here, but that's about where it's going to sit, right there on this riser. Now I have another dilemma. My main sheet system, which is going to be up on the hard top here, I've got a lot of friends who've actually got their main sheet running their car traveller running around the back of the lounge down the back there. And although that creates such a great mechanical advantage over the boom, it actually allows to pull it down. You get a lot of downward force on that, which controls the shape of the sail. I actually can't do that because our hardtop is way too long unless I have my boom even longer, which I don't want. So what I'm anticipating doing is our main sheet system being along the top of this here, and I am actually seriously now considering a German sheeted method. Now that German sheeting is basically a HTX block, stand-up block there, and another one there with a fiddle on it as well. So it's a two-wheeled block there and there, which actually feeds up to the boom, which will be about where that support is on the tent there. A few of you out there going, oh, don't do the A-frame, don't do the German sheeting, because you don't get enough pull down on the boom to be able to control the shape of the sail. Well, I believe we will, and as a backup, I intend to have a hydraulic vang on the boom, which will help to hold that down, or hold the boom down as a preventer. You need to think about all these things because of the distance between the boom, which is around probably about a foot lower than that crossbeam there, and the hard top. There's not a lot of power pulling down, so I need to have something that's going to prevent the boom from lifting up and keep it down to control the shape. And we will get more than enough width. We can actually come right out to here, and then if I need to go further, I can run a preventer down to the side here onto a U-bolt down on the side here, which will actually leave us for those long downwind runs. So by putting a preventer on down the side here, I can actually keep them out of the shrouds, which come down and touch down around about here on the side of the boat in between these two stanchions. So there's been a lot of thought going to this, and a lot of the boats we're seeing now are actually coming out with this A-frame design. We're not a performance catamaran. We are a cruising boat, and I'm not after serious control with the Traveller. I want simplicity, and I want it all to happen right here in the helm station. It's taking me absolutely ages to decide what to do here. This winch here is going to be for my main sheet system. It's going to be a dedicated winch for the main, so there's nothing else going to drive off it, but I have to make it usable for anyone that can bring on the main and obviously adjust the boom. And the issue is that this is about at probably around my chest height, so being able to enact a winch on the top of this is going to be a little bit awkward. Certainly is okay for me. Where I'm standing is on the helm staircase, and you're not going to be able to stand here because there's going to be a seat under here, so I'm going to have to think about that. I really think we're going to be up on our knees operating it, but I do need to drop it. It needs to come down around about that far, and preferably on an angle so it can be used like this. It's just going to make it a lot more ergonomic for anyone using it, especially the likes of Janet and Ellen, who are a bit shorter. I'm going to make the deepest cut, so I'm going to cut this out, and then that'll drop down. So that'll be inserted in here, and that'll put that winch on an angle, and it'll end up about here, which will make it much more usable. And it's going to be a little bit of work to do because I'm going to have to make sure I've got really superior reinforcement underneath that, and also access to the nuts and bolts that hold it in place. So I'm going to leave that overnight, come back in tomorrow and start to fit it out. That has to be able to withstand the load of the main sheet, and that means that I'm actually going to use a large piece of G10, not just under the winch but under that entire platform. So this will end up around about 1 inch thick, and that will actually be pushing up under the hard top as well, not just underneath this platform here, because that certainly isn't going to be strong enough. I got totally sick of sanding my stanchion bases the other day, so Janet said, "Is there anything I can do?" I said, "Yeah, you bet." How you going, Darren? Yeah, right. So we fed and sanded all the stanchion bases all the way along here. They're looking fantastic, and a lot of detailed sanding in here. Looking good. How's that feel?
Yeah,
Pretty good?
so.
Well done. Oh, geez, it's hot, isn't it, today? Just can't get over how warm you get. Cooking. Oh, you look so hot. Jaden's having a chat. How are you, mate? Look at my poor wife's work with the heat. It's so... What a twat. Knock him out for me, John. Hit him over the head. That's it. So by putting in the G10 here and having it pushing upwards on the edges of the hard top, I've got a lot to think about here with this winch. Firstly, I've got to reinforce it because the load is going to be that way. The main sheet will come in from the back or from the stern and pull the winch that way. Now I will have a set of jammers here somewhere, but the problem I'm going to have is that I need to reinforce underneath it. So I have this piece of G10 here, which is fully underneath the hard top, not underneath this base plate here. And then I also have to have access underneath to be able to screw and mount this. So I intend to put a sort of a 6-inch hatch up underneath here. So I have a further complication in that I need to be able to get wires along here, which was originally getting all the way around to there. Now I've got a problem. I need to basically bring them down through this piece of foam back up to the conduit and around, and that's going to be a little bit complicated. So I can core this all the way through, and in fact I could probably even put some of this in before I glue this to this, and that would probably be the best method. And then I've got to try to round it all off. So what I've come up with, I need to round this down so that it all sort of integrates nicely in there. So I've got this big ugly as hell thing here, is I've come up with this extra foam that I can put in here, run the conduit all the way through that from inside there down along and back up again, and then basically shape this, laminate it all back in, further reinforcing the whole job. I've got our G10 and I've got 25mm of foam that's going to allow for access under the hatch and our electrics. Now we're talking. Beautiful. All right, that is all in place. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of extra work to tidy all of that up because it's a bit messy, but there's gonna be some shaping going on here tomorrow, but yeah, that's gonna be pretty good, I think.
And an extremely skilled coach.
All right, that's now shaped. That's pretty much how it's going to look. I'm not that phased by how that looks, to be honest. I think that's not a bad solution, given I've got all the strength in the G10 and the winch plinth there. It'll have a white access hatch like so I can get to the underneath of the winch. Now technically I should be able to tap thread into that G10 material, but I'm going to put nuts and bolts and washers on the back, even though I can technically should be able to tap thread into it. I really don't think that's going to be good enough. Nuts and bolts always better. I might even tap thread into it and put nuts and bolts. So I've got to spend a bit of time up here, and I'm not really sure what to do. My original intention was for this to act as a water dam to stop any water, rain coming down here, and basically make it run off there or run off to the side there, which essentially is going to end up in the cockpit anyway. But I'd prefer it if it doesn't run down here. So what I intend to do is put a continuation of this combing around the winch, just so I have got water protection from coming from the front and from the side. But it will create a pool here. I may need to put in some sort of a drain here. I'm not really sure how I'd do that, short of having some sort of an upright or extension down to the floor here, which basically acts as a support and a drain. I don't really need a support there, but it might come to pass that if we get that much water, it might be annoying enough that we could run a stainless tube all the way to the floor there and straight out and make that the physical drain. So there's lots of things you can do to circumvent problems. I've just given the whole thing a really good dust off down here along these stanchion bases all the way along the side. They're now ready for paint. They're faired and they are hand sanded to detail. Janet had a go yesterday. I've had another go at it, or 2 goes at it today, to make sure that they're okay. And then I'm going to start to work towards the front there. Look at that windlass box, and make sure I can get that. You know, I've got to raise the lid up even more than I anticipated, and try to tie that in. And ultimately I think that's looking pretty good. I think that's a great solution. I'll have to block in the old conduit here because that is no longer required, but that's not biggie. And then I can basically start rounding this, get this all shaped, get it ready for our winch here. The only thing is I can't have this combing too high. It's probably only going to be half as high as this right here, where I really don't need it to be low, but that's where the lines are going to feed in onto this. So technically, I might just get away with it. There'll be a clutch here somewhere. Our jammers will be here just so they're easy to reach, but also will direct at the right height, and I might get away with that height. I don't know yet. I'm sort of looking at it now thinking might just act as a fair lead here. I could even put a fair lead on the top of it to guide it into that winch. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. So there we go.